My stepmother sat in that courtroom, crying fake tears, telling the judge, "She neglects those children. I'm the one who raised them." The judge listened quietly. Then he opened a brown folder, read something silently, and looked up. "Ma'am," he said to my stepmother, "do you know what this document is?" She didn't answer. "Because the woman you just called unfit," he continued, "is the reason this family court exists. Before I tell you what was inside that brown folder, take a moment to like and subscribe to the channel, and tell me your country in the comments. Now let's begin. My name is Jessamine Wilder. I am 33 years old. And on a Tuesday morning in October, in a small family courtroom in Traverse City, Michigan, the woman who replaced my mother tried to take my children. She almost succeeded. Almost. Let me take you back. My mother died when I was 11. Ovarian cancer. She fought it for 2 years, and in the end, the disease won the way it always does. Quietly, at 3 a.m., while I was asleep in the next room holding a stuffed rabbit she had given me the Christmas before. I didn't hear her go. My father found her first. I remember the sound he made. Not crying, something deeper than crying. A sound I've never heard another human being make since. My mother's name was Eleonora. She was a social worker for Grand Traverse County, specializing in child welfare cases. She spent her career in underfunded courtrooms and overcrowded foster homes, fighting for kids who had no one else fighting for them. She drove a 2001 Subaru Outback with 214,000 miles on it and kept a box of granola bars in the back seat in case she visited a home where the children hadn't eaten. That was the kind of woman she was. Every cent went to the work, not to herself. After she died, my father fell apart. Not all at once, slowly, the way a house settles when the foundation cracks. He stopped cooking, stopped going to work, stopped looking at me in a way that felt present. I learned to make my own lunches, do my own laundry, walk myself to school. At 11 years old, I became my own parent. And I didn't realize until much later how much that shaped me, both the strength it gave me and the loneliness it left behind. Then Vivian arrived. My father met Vivian Calder at a grief support group in Petoskey, 6 months after my mother died. She was newly divorced, sharp-featured, well-dressed, and attentive in a way that my father mistook for warmth. She listened. She cooked. She filled the silence in our house with noise that sounded enough like normalcy that my father stopped questioning it. They married within a year. I was 12. Now, here's the thing I need to be honest about. Vivian wasn't a monster from day one. People rarely are. She made an effort, at least in the beginning. She drove me to school. She helped with homework. She even came to my 8th grade science fair, where I presented a project on water filtration systems in underserved communities, a topic I'd chosen because of my mother. Vivian stood in the back of the gym and clapped. And for a moment, I thought maybe this could work. But Vivian had a problem. A deep, structural problem that I didn't understand until years later. She needed to be needed. Not in the normal way that people want to feel useful. In a consuming, controlling way. She needed to be the center. The savior. The one everyone depended on. And as long as I was a grieving, quiet, compliant child, I fit into that narrative perfectly. The trouble started when I stopped being quiet. At 16, I started pushing back. Small things at first, wanting to choose my own clothes, staying late at the library, applying to a summer program at the University of Michigan without asking her permission. Each act of independence felt like a personal attack to Vivian. "You think you don't need me?" she said once, standing in my doorway at midnight. Without me, this family would have fallen apart. She wasn't wrong about the family, but she said it like a threat, not a fact. My father, by then, had become a shadow. He went to work, came home, ate dinner, and disappeared into the garage where he built model ships that he never finished. He didn't intervene. He didn't notice. Or maybe he noticed and decided that peace was more important than truth. Either way, I was on my own. I graduated from Traverse City Central High School with a 4.1 GPA and a full scholarship to the University of Michigan's Gerald R. Ford School of Public Policy. I chose public policy because of my mother, because I remembered those granola bars in the back seat, because I wanted to fix the systems she had spent her life navigating with duct tape and determination. Vivian didn't come to my graduation. She said she had a migraine. My father came, sat in the back row, and left before I could find him in the crowd. I drove myself home. At Michigan, something happened that I need to tell you about, because it matters later. During my junior year, I took a seminar on juvenile justice reform taught by Professor Adissa Oyelaran, a former federal policy advisor. The final project required students to design a proposal for a real-world institutional problem. Most students chose something theoretical. I didn't. I wrote a 47-page proposal for restructuring family court services in rural Michigan counties. I focused on Grand Traverse County specifically, my mother's old jurisdiction. The proposal addressed three critical failures: inadequate legal representation for low-income parents, lack of on-site child psychological services, and the absence of a centralized family advocacy office. I included cost projections, staffing models, and a 5-year implementation timeline. Professor O'Yelleran read it, looked at me, and said, "This isn't a school paper. This is a blueprint." He sent it to the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. They passed it to the state legislature. And 18 months later, my proposal became the framework for the Michigan Family Court Modernization Act, a $38 million state initiative that restructured family court services in 14 rural counties. I was 22 years old, and the first court to be rebuilt under that framework was the Grand Traverse County Family Court, the same court where my mother had spent years fighting for children, and the same court where, 11 years later, my stepmother would try to take mine. But we're not there yet. After Michigan, I went to Georgetown for my master's in public policy, then spent 3 years in Washington working for a nonprofit called the National Center for Family Advocacy. I helped draft federal guidelines for child welfare courts. I testified before a congressional subcommittee on foster care reform. I published research in the Journal of Family Law and Policy. And I did all of it quietly, without telling anyone in Traverse City, because the person I had become felt so far from the girl Vivian still believed I was. That was my flaw. My silence. I let Vivian's version of me, helpless, dependent, ungrateful, exist unchallenged for over a decade because correcting it felt exhausting. And that silence had consequences I didn't see coming. At 27, I moved back to Michigan. Not to Traverse City, to Ann Arbor. I married a man named Tobias, a pediatric occupational therapist at Mott Children's Hospital. Good, steady kind. We had twins, Noah and Idris, and for a few years life was calm. Then Tobias was killed in a car accident on I-94 during a January ice storm. He was driving home from a conference in Kalamazoo. The state police said he died on impact. The twins were 3 years old. And just like that, I was my father, standing in a house that suddenly felt like it had no walls, trying to hold everything together while the ground disappeared. I moved back to Traverse City. I don't fully know why. Maybe because my mother was buried there. Maybe because the house I grew up in still existed, and something about its walls felt safe, even though the people inside them hadn't been safe for years. My father was still alive, still quiet, still building model ships. And Vivian was still there, older now, still sharp, still needing to be the center of everything. At first, she helped. She watched the twins while I worked remotely for the National Center. She cooked meals. She folded laundry. And I let her because I was drowning in grief and exhaustion and I needed someone, anyone, to help me keep my children alive and fed while I tried to figure out how to exist without Tobias. But Vivian didn't just help. She took over. Slowly, methodically, the way she always operated. She started making decisions without asking. Changing the twins' bedtimes. Feeding them foods I'd said no to. Signing Noah up for a preschool program I hadn't approved. And when I pushed back, she'd say, "You're overwhelmed, Jessamine. Let me handle it." The same words every time. Like a script. Then she started saying other things. To my father, she can barely manage. To her friends at church, those children would be lost without me. To the twins themselves, Grammy's here. Grammy takes care of you. She was building a case. I just didn't see it yet. 8 months after I moved back, Vivian filed for emergency temporary guardianship of Noah and Idris. She claimed I was an unfit mother, emotionally unstable, professionally absent, and neglectful. She had documentation. Photographs of an unwashed dish in my sink. A screenshot of a text where I told her I was exhausted and can't do this anymore. Taken completely out of context from a conversation about a work deadline. A signed statement from her friend, a woman named Deirdre, who babysat the twins once and claimed I was visibly distracted and disengaged. The filing landed on a Tuesday morning. I opened the envelope, read it, and sat on my kitchen floor for 20 minutes. Not because I was surprised, because I finally understood what Vivian had been doing all along. Every meal she cooked, every bedtime she changed, every decision she made without asking, it was all evidence. She hadn't been helping me. She had been replacing me. And now she had the paperwork to prove it. The hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks later. Grand Traverse County Family Court. The same building my mother used to walk into every morning with a box of granola bars and a case file under her arm. I hired an attorney, a woman named Paloma Reyes from a family law firm in Traverse City. She was direct, experienced, and the first person who looked at Vivian's filing and said, "This is manufactured. Every piece of it." But she also said something that stayed with me. Manufactured evidence still works if the judge believes it. We need more than your word. I didn't sleep much those 3 weeks. But I worked. I pulled together every document, every record, every piece of my professional life that Vivian had never bothered to learn about. And I gave it all to Paloma. The morning of the hearing, the courtroom was small. Wood-paneled walls, fluorescent lights, the American flag in the corner slightly crooked. My father was there, sitting in the back, looking at his hands. He hadn't said a word about the filing. Not to support me. Not to support Vivian. Just silence. His specialty. Vivian sat at the petitioner's table with her attorney, a man named Lowell who wore an expensive watch and spoke like he was performing for a jury that wasn't there. She was dressed in a navy blue suit, no jewelry except her wedding ring, and she had tissues in her hand, folded ready like props. I sat with Paloma. The twins were with a certified court-appointed childcare provider in the next room. I could hear Idris laughing through the wall. That sound kept me steady. The judge was Honorable Malcolm Jeffords. 60s, silver-haired, reading glasses, the kind of face that had heard 10,000 stories and stopped being impressed by any of them. He had a brown folder on his desk. I didn't know what was in it. Not yet. Vivian's attorney went first. He presented her case methodically, the photographs, the text messages, Deirdre's statement. He painted a picture of a grieving, overwhelmed woman who had abandoned her responsibilities and left her children in the care of their concerned, loving step-grandmother. Then Vivian took the stand. She cried. Not the loud kind, the careful kind. Tears that rolled down her cheeks at precisely the right moments. She dabbed them with the tissues she'd brought. She called the twins my babies. She described waking up at 5 a.m. to make their breakfast, driving them to preschool, reading to them at night. I love those children as if they were my own, she said, her voice cracking. And it breaks my heart to see them in a home where they're not being cared for. She looked at me when she said it. And for a second, just a second, I saw something real behind the performance. Fear. Not fear of losing. Fear of being unnecessary. Because if she wasn't saving someone, if she wasn't the indispensable one, then who was she? But understanding someone's wound doesn't mean you let them use it to cut you. Then it was our turn. Paloma stood up, calm, precise. She didn't attack Vivian directly. Instead, she submitted my professional record. All of it. The University of Michigan degree, the Georgetown Masters, the 3 years at the National Center for Family Advocacy, the congressional testimony, the published research, the federal guidelines I helped write, and then the Michigan Family Court Modernization Act. Judge Jeffords had been listening with the practiced patience of a man who had done this 1,000 times. But when Paloma mentioned the Modernization Act, he paused. He removed his reading glasses. He looked at me, really looked, for the first time. Then he opened the brown folder on his desk. I want to make sure I understand this correctly, he said slowly. He looked down at the document inside, then back at me. Ms. Wilder, are you the author of the policy framework that restructured this court? Yes, Your Honor, I said. Silence. Not the courtroom drama kind. The real kind, where the air itself seems to hold still. He turned to Vivian. Ma'am, he said, do you know what this document is? She didn't answer. Her attorney shifted in his seat. This, Judge Jeffords continued, holding up a printed copy of the implementation report, is the foundational policy document for the Michigan Family Court Modernization Act, a $38 million state initiative that rebuilt family court services in 14 counties, including this one. He set it down. The family advocacy office down the hall, the one where your step-grandchildren are being cared for right now while we sit here, exists because of this document. The Child Psychological Services program that this court uses to evaluate custody cases was designed based on recommendations in this document. The woman you just called an unfit mother is the reason this family court functions the way it does. Vivian's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Her attorney put his hand on her arm, not in support, but in the way you stop someone from speaking when speaking will only make things worse. Judge Jeffords wasn't finished. I've also reviewed Ms. Wilder's employment record, he said. She is currently a senior policy fellow at the National Center for Family Advocacy. She has authored or co-authored 11 peer-reviewed publications on child welfare. She has testified before Congress. And she has been the primary caregiver for her children since their father's death, while maintaining full-time professional responsibilities that directly serve families in crisis. He removed his glasses again. This time, the gesture felt different, heavier. Mrs. Calder, he said to Vivian, I have been a family court judge for 23 years. I have seen genuine cases of unfit parenting. What I see here is not that. What I see here is a woman who used proximity and trust to manufacture a narrative of incompetence against a mother who was grieving and asked for help. He paused. The petition for emergency guardianship is denied. Furthermore, I am referring this matter to the county prosecutor's office for review of potential filing of a fraudulent custody claim. Vivian made a sound. Small, involuntary. Like something cracking inside a wall that had been holding too long. Her attorney stood up. Your Honor, my client. Your client, Judge Jeffords said, should consult with you privately before saying anything further in this courtroom. Silence. I stood up slowly. My legs were shaking, but my voice wasn't. Your Honor, may I say one thing? He nodded. I turned to Vivian. She was sitting with her hands in her lap, tissues crumpled, the navy suit suddenly looking too big for her. And I said what I had been carrying for 22 years. You came into my life when I was 12 years old and my mother had just died. I needed someone to be kind to me. And for a while you were. I've never forgotten that. My voice was steady. But somewhere along the way, your kindness became control. And today, you tried to use a courtroom my mother spent her life serving, to take my children from me. I paused. I don't hate you, Vivian. I think you're afraid. Afraid of being alone, afraid of not being needed, afraid that if you're not saving someone, you disappear. I understand that. But my children are not your rescue project. And I am not the helpless girl you need me to be. She didn't respond. Tears, real ones this time, I think, fell down her face. Not the performative kind from earlier. The kind that come when a person is finally seen for exactly who they are and has nowhere left to hide. I walked to the side room, opened the door, and picked up Idris with one arm and took Noah's hand with the other. Idris grabbed my collar. Noah said, Mama, I drew a picture of a whale. I said, show me in the car, baby. My father was standing in the hallway. He looked at me, not through me, not past me, at me. For the first time in years. Your mother would be proud, he said. His voice broke on the last word. I didn't stop walking. But I nodded. Because those 5 words were the first real thing he had said to me since I was 11 years old. And even though they were 22 years late, I took them. I put them in the same place I keep my mother's memory. Somewhere safe, somewhere deep, where nothing Vivian or anyone else could ever reach. I drove home with the windows down. October in Traverse City, cold air, gold leaves, the smell of Lake Michigan coming through the trees on M37. Noah fell asleep in her car seat. Idris hummed a song I didn't recognize. And I drove past the courthouse one more time before turning home. The building my mother walked into every morning. The building I rebuilt from a college dorm room. The building where a judge just told a room full of people that I was the reason it stood. People ask me what happened with Vivian after that. The answer is I set boundaries. She sees the twins twice a month, supervised at a public location. No overnights. No solo decisions. No showing up unannounced. She agreed because the alternative, a fraud referral and permanent estrangement, was worse. Whether she's changed, I don't know. People who need to be needed don't usually stop needing. My father calls more now. Short calls. Awkward. He doesn't know how to be a father at 67 after forgetting how at 42. But he's trying. And trying, after all those years of nothing, counts for something. The twins are 5 now. Idris wants to be a fish doctor, which I think means marine biologist. Noah wants to be a judge. I told her that's a very good job. She said, I know. The man with the brown folder was cool. I laughed for the first time in months. Sometimes, at night, after the kids are asleep, I sit at my desk and open the original file, my 47-page proposal from junior year. Page 1 still has Professor O'Yelleran's note in red ink. This isn't a school paper. This is a blueprint. I run my fingers over the words and think about my mother. About her Subaru with 214,000 miles. About the granola bars. About the children she spent her life protecting in courtrooms, just like the one where I sat that Tuesday morning. She didn't live long enough to see what I built. But I built it for her. Every page, every policy, every restructured courtroom in 14 Michigan counties, it was always for her. And when that judge opened the brown folder and the room went silent, I felt something I hadn't felt since I was 11 years old, standing in a hallway holding a stuffed rabbit, listening to a sound I couldn't name. I felt her. The woman who called me unfit didn't lose a custody case that day. She lost the only family that still let her in. And me? I walked out of that courtroom the same way my mother used to, with a case file, 2 children, and the quiet knowledge that the system works when someone cares enough to build it right. You don't prove you're a good mother by defending yourself. You prove it by what you build when no one's watching.